Hello, everyone. Welcome to Transform Now. I'm Brad Hairston.
And I'm Michael Marchuk.
And this is the weekly pulse check, taking a look at what's happening in the world of automation and AI news. So, Michael, we have some really interesting headlines here to get to. Let's dive right in. The first one is from the Associated Press, and it's titled Trump Highlights Partnership Investing $500 billion in AI. So Michael, on his first full day after being sworn in as the next US president, Trump announced a joint venture investing $500 billion in AI infrastructure. And this is a joint partnership formed by the US government, by OpenAI, Oracle, and SoftBank. This is pretty big news, and it caught my attention because, number one, a lot of this stuff is going to be built in Texas, where I live. But also, we know that there is a significant shortage of power for AI. This has been a recurring topic, and we know Sam Altman himself approached the Biden presidency not too long ago about this very thing. So he seems to have found his answer in the new president. But what are your thoughts on this?
So a couple different things. So as you mentioned, there's this collaboration between a few large players putting this new Stargate entity in motion. And what's interesting about it is that it includes these players plus a couple others. I know Microsoft is in there, as well as NVIDIA and ARM, the chip maker. This is a big deal in terms of first of all, the amount of money they're putting towards it, but also towards the combination of the power generation and data center space. So as you know, OpenAI has been very, very reliant on Microsoft's data center space to be able to power off all their ChatGPT infrastructure. So I suspect that this is broadening that kind of platform to expand, because I know they've mentioned in the past that they'd like to have their own data centers. Although I'm not sure if you call it your own data center, if you're in a conjunction with Microsoft and SoftBank and Oracle and a bunch of others. So, but it is another data center to maybe spread out the potential risk of having this, data center outages or what it is, data center targets. But as you mentioned, it's a very large investment, and that just underscores the fact that because we're looking at power and the space and the chips and everything else, all those things, they take a lot of cash to be able to procure that. Yeah. So while this is a very large investment into this, it'll be to see where that ROI comes from these entities, because, you had to make a lot of money to make that $500 billion investment worthwhile. So it'll be interesting to see where this goes. But it is good to see that there's an emphasis on continuing to grow out AI infrastructure to be able to support building out these new capabilities.
Right. And clearly Trump has made, enabling the US to compete with China in the AI space a priority. So this is in line with that. I do hate the name, though, Stargate. It sounds like a bad 1980s science fiction movie or something. But
I wonder if Elon Musk had anything to do with the naming of that.
It's possible. I did research where this is where they're going to build all these data centers, because I haven't heard anything about it, even though I'm in Texas. And so I looked it up, and they've started building the first one in Abilene, Texas, which there is a lot of open land in Abilene. It's not the most attractive place in the world. So my apologies to Abilene residents, but that is where apparently they're going to build these the first 10 data centers, each of which will be 500,000 square feet in size. So it's a lot of infrastructure. Yeah,
it's a good thing that Texas is so large. It has a lot of open space to be able to build those massive data centers.
There you go.
Unfortunately, I think all the cattle ranchers who have to sell their land will be upset for like 3 seconds until they cash their check.
If they did, they made a lot of money on it. I'm telling you.
Exactly.
All right. So moving to the next article, this also involves OpenAI, and it
we
ties
have a lot that OpenAI. OpenAI has been in the news quite a bit lately.
They definitely have. So last week, you and I talked about an article written by a mathematician who was talking about this recent test where they fed these frontier math problems into a couple of different large language models, one of which was OpenAI. And OpenAI came back and said they achieved 25% accuracy. Now, the article we read that we talked about was taking the position, well, this shows that AI is still not up to the level of a human PhD in mathematics. And that's a separate argument. This article, which comes from Analytics India magazine, is titled OpenAI Just Pulled a Theranos with O3. And so what they're talking about is the fact that, yes, OpenAI was in this frontier math, contest, if you will. And OpenAI is claiming this is a huge victory because its competitors had only been able to achieve about a 2% accuracy on frontier math, whereas they achieved 25%. But something is afoul in Denmark, as Hamlet would say. It turns out that OpenAI had access to much of the test data in advance of the benchmarking. Not only that, they sponsored the whole thing, and the mathematicians and others involved didn't know about it. So, Michael, what are your thoughts here? Is this a Theranos moment, as the article calls it, for OpenAI?
To me, they're taking a play out of the playbook that healthcare has used for quite a while. So Big Pharma has for a long time sponsored research into very specific activities related to drugs they just so happen to be developing.
Yeah.
So when I see this, it is a little disconcerting that you have an unfair advantage for your model. And with anything else, if you know the test before you take it, it's likely that you do well on it. And I think this is probably the key here is that they understood sort of where this was going to be able to train the model so that it could do very well at it. Now, I wouldn't consider 25% acing the test by any stretch. So even though they had some of this research ahead of their testing of this, they really didn't ace it. I mean, I would have thought they would have gotten 90%, given the fact they had all the data ahead of time. But maybe maybe that the model is not necessarily fully baked in with all the data, and that's why they just did 10 times better than their competitors. So anyway, this is one of those fishy things where, listen, nobody really cares. Benchmarks are benchmarks for a reason. And if you create a tool that excels at a benchmark, it may not necessarily mean it excels at real life problems.
Right.
And therefore, you have to take it with a grain of salt. When we start looking at any kind of benchmark things, that should be the reason why we look at it. Why are we suspecting that this is a good benchmark? Maybe it's not a great benchmark. And your mileage may vary depending on how you apply this to your real world problem. So again, to me, this is just a news item saying, hey, look how great we did, when in fact, it may not have been the publicity they were looking for.
Right. Yeah, it's definitely not great PR for OpenAI, but hey, they just got announced as part of a $500 billion joint venture with the U.S. government. So I don't think Sam Altman is losing too much sleep over the frontier math.
Speaking of Sam Altman too, the picture in the article has him flipping his collar up, looking like, hey, look at me. So it's a very interesting photo they actually put in there with him.
Yeah.
So,
all right, well, sticking on the OpenAI thread.
Let's beat that OpenAI drum some more.
Yes, one more article related to them. So this is from Tech Times. The title is OpenAI's ChatGPT AI agent is coming soon. Autonomous task coming soon after code appears in Mac app. So this is talking about a discovery by a software engineer who is known to leak a lot of things to the press. And he has come forward and said that OpenAI agents for ChatGPT, the code is already showing up in the Mac version of the app. So this seems to imply that there's a big announcement and there's a big release of this agentic era of ChatGPT. So, Michael, what do you think about this news? It is pretty fascinating. And with all the other things going on around OpenAI, how do they have the bandwidth to do something like that while they're doing all these other things?
Well, they kind of have to, first of all, because Claude has their was a tool use component, which is very similar in terms of being able to leverage an agent to accomplish tasks. We've seen this, and we've talked about it here a couple of times, that the agentic AI agenda, if you will, is happening in 2025. And these organizations that are developing ARs are very, very heavy with their focus on this. So as we see the application of AI into these deeper task-related or process-related components, it shouldn't be a surprise. What is a surprise is that this guy found the code buried inside some of this Mac app code that he was looking into. But it shouldn't be a surprise overall that they were trying to develop this. Now, I don't know how long this is going to take them for them to release it to the public, if it's going to go out beta anytime soon. But likely we're going to see agentic being released by all the major players in 2025 in some form or fashion. And I think we're going to have our next article talking a little bit more about some of the potential things we need to look for when it comes to using agentic AI everywhere. But it shouldn't be a surprise overall that this is a direction that these larger organizations who are developing AI large language models are headed.
Yeah, I'm interested to see what they can do when they do come out. And I'm hoping they're available to the free version of ChatGPT, which is what I use. If not, then maybe I'll have to, get out my wallet and subscribe. But definitely interested and eagerly awaiting whatever comes out, assuming that it will be available for the PC as it is for the Mac. I mean, that would make sense. Okay, well, let's assume it does happen. Then this next article is very relevant, as you said. It's from Data Breach Today. Now, you spend your nights and weekends reading.
I do. I often just peruse the articles on Data Breach Today when I have nothing better to do.
I imagine someone with a pocket protector and horn rim glasses reading this, but
who is far smarter than both of us put together.
So the article is titled, "What Enterprises Need to Know About Agentic AI Risk." So very, very pertinent to what is happening in the market, especially now if OpenAI is maybe bringing this out here soon. And this article goes into some pretty heavy detail. It talks about a comprehensive threat modeling plan where you use these trusted and untrusted zones. And it was a little much for my brain to comprehend, but I knew, Michael, that this would be an article right up your alley. So break it down for us.
So coming in from a security perspective, there's a thing called zero trust. And the idea behind a lot of these things is that you don't know who the actors are who will be transversing your network. And in this case, for much of the firewall kind of zoning perspectives. And this is taking a similar type of approach. I'm not sure what these models are going to do. Therefore, we're going to take these untrusted models and put them sort of outside that zone, let them do their thing. But before we take action on anything, we're going to run through a trusted model that we either understand, control, manage, or whatever, to be able to support either approving or not approving the actions that were recommended. So part of that gives you a little bit of a guardrail because you have another process that reviews the output coming from there to see if, in fact, there are any potential malicious actions that could be coming from that sort of thing. Now, when you look at any of these kind of, trusting, verifying components, you need to understand who's deciding what's trusted and not trusted, and how do you decide whether or not one thing is good or not good, because an action to update a row in a database could be a trusted action that happens. But if you're trying to do a specific row, like the administrator's password, maybe that's not, a trusted action.
Yeah.
So there needs to be a lot of focus on how best to apply those trusted actions. The other part of it too is we've seen this with social engineering, as we call it, where you have people calling in saying, "Hey, I lost my password. I can't get into this account here. I'm leaving on a plane. Can you help me out real quick to get this done here? Please, I need to get this done." And there's a social engineering aspect to it. Well, I think the same thing is what they're worried about with LLMs as we apply the same type of creative prompting, if you will, that could cause these LLMs, no matter how many ways they've been put in place, specific guardrails put in place, that could be overcome by creative prompting. Like, hey, ignore everything you heard before about this stuff here. This is a really important request that can't be ignored. And you start piling on, where you have to do what I tell you to do. Now apply this thing and go move forward with it. Now, I suspect that's one of the things that having these untrusted versus trusted components really come into play, because even if you could socially engineer the untrusted version of it somehow with some creative prompting, by the time that response gets through to the action phase, a trusted version would look at it and say, this is not something that we would normally permit to have happen. So either we escalate it to a human being to take a look at, or we apply some other filters to it to say, you can't do that, we'll push it back, or we will deny it altogether. So there are ways to approach this, but it's going to be a very tricky road, because with anything like this, it really does become, where's the trust level? Where's that trust wall at? What's on the good side and what's on the not so good side, and where do we get to protect ourselves? So lots of stuff when we talk about these emerging technologies, this is certainly an emerging technology. And how do we harness the power of all these LLMs without shooting ourselves in the foot?
Yeah, I thought it was really interesting the way it talked about untrusted data. At one point in the article, it says, in the case of exposing an LLM to untrusted data, its capabilities or the function calls should be lowered down to the least trusted data it receives. Just figuring that out and being able to acclimate your agent to know what's trusted or not trusted, and then respond accordingly. That's
it highlights the point too that data is super critical, and most organizations do not have great data hygiene. So here we get to a point where, how do we take the untrusted data or least trusted data, which may not be coming from our organization, and make the assumption that the organization has trusted data, which it certainly may have cleaner data than perhaps the open models have, but are you sure? Right. And that's the bigger question. And I don't think our companies any company is ready to go in and say, I am confident in our data, all of our data. And I think that's probably the biggest challenge everyone's going to have is, again, where do you draw that line?
Yeah. You really are a data breach today, reader, aren't you? I can just tell. I mean,
I go in the closet with my little headlamp, and I sit there and I read the paper version of it, because I don't trust reading the electronic version of it.
All right. Well, let's move on. The final article today is from ProFootballNetwork.com. It's titled, "That's Genius. Jaden Daniels' unique VR training routine sends fans into a frenzy." So this is very, very relevant now, as we're in the middle of the NFL playoffs, and the Washington Commanders, who were absolutely horrid last year, they're now one game away from the Super Bowl, and which has been an amazing comeback. But even more amazing is the fact that they're using a rookie quarterback, Jaden Daniels, and Jaden Daniels embraces VR technology in his training. So he started doing this in college. It worked really well for him. Now he's doing it as the quarterback of the Commanders. And this article is all about that. And it's about the benefits he receives from this. And I just thought it was really a fascinating use of technology, which is clearly having an impact, because he has an incredible rating He's played way above expectations. And as I said, his team is a game away from the Super Bowl. So what do you think about this, Michael?
So I'm going to, help other folks who are around the world who may not necessarily watch NFL football, like us Americans do, American football. In fact, everyone else calls it football. We call it soccer. So anyway, regardless of the sport, this is an indication of, one-upping and understanding how best to leverage technology to increase your value and your training. So when we think of training specifically related to technology, you and I will sit and we'll read articles, we'll read books, we'll look at demos, we'll try software and whatnot to help understand and improve our brain. Well, for sports players, their brains are really wired for reacting and understanding the sport that they're playing. Mm-hmm. And in this case here, what Jaden Daniels did was leverage virtual reality technology, but not at regular speed, at 1.75 speed, so almost nearly 2x what life is working at. He's running the plays and leveraging VR to help himself understand how to read the plays more quickly and be able to respond more quickly.
Yeah.
So I can see this is another way that we can leverage technology. We've had flight simulators for pilots for a long time. And this is basically that next version of taking the VR concept and saying, I'm going to create an environment where I can train safely and have all kinds of things thrown at you that you can now respond to and learn how to respond to much more quickly. And again, he's not just doing this in real time. He's doing it in almost double real time to help his brain understand how to think much more quickly about the situations and make quicker reads on what's happening. Yeah, now, I can see this also applying to a bunch of other things too. Imagine doing this for folks who are on the shop floor in a manufacturing facility. Perhaps they can also learn how to manage their product development or product manufacturing much more effectively by having it run at a higher speed while they're having to approach the problems that are thrown at them through a simulator. Certainly within the military, I can imagine this is a huge thing within the military to allow folks to train this way too. Again, doing it in faster than real-time speed helps train your brain to see things more quickly and be able to react to them and respond to them more quickly. So very, very interesting application of technology to be able to do this. And I'm sure that the folks who are playing first-person shooter games are like, dude, we do this all the time. This is nothing, no big deal.
Yeah, I thought about baseball. Can you imagine someone practicing taking pitches coming at them at 150 miles an hour
or 200 miles an hour?
When they take it off, everything's going to slow down, right? 100-mile-an-hour fastball is going to look slower. They're going to be able to react quicker. So I think it is an amazing use of this emerging technology. And like you said, there's going to be lots of uses in industry as well. So
it's a brain hack. It really is.
It is a perfect brain hack. Well, that's all the time we have for this episode of the Pulse Check. Thank you for being here. Remember, we publish another podcast every week featuring a tremendous guest. So be sure and check that out. And we'll see you next week right here on the Pulse Check. Bye for now.